Hello and welcome back to the Guild of Gluttony, where today I am making another recipe from the Heroes Feast cookbook. But before I get into the recipe, I want to show off these dice that I recently got. I actually won them in a giveaway on Instagram from Artemis Dice Company. These are made by Sam, and she's actually working through a lot of the Heroes Feast cookbook as well, so you should go check her out. So today's recipe is called Fried Fingers, and it's found in the Uncommon Cuisine section of the Heroes Feast cookbook. The description for this recipe says that it was a dish popularized by the lizard folk of Saltmarsh, where it was commonly prepared with humanoid parts instead of poultry. It goes on to mention that these breaded strips give a whole new meaning to the term finger food. And if you know anything about me, you'll know that my favorite food is fried chicken, and my favorite part of the English language is puns. So needless to say, I was really excited about this recipe. I'm starting out the process by making my own potato chips, which will later serve as the breading for the strips. My dad has a friend who is about to get rid of this deli slicer, so he checked with me to see if I could use it for anything, and I'm really glad he did because it made this process a whole lot simpler. I've made potato chips in the past using just a normal kitchen knife, and it took me way longer, and I ended up with chips that vary drastically in their thickness. You can see here that I'm able to get a super thin slice using this machine, which is just perfect for potato chips. I wasn't really following a recipe for this part just because potato chips are relatively simple to make. You just have to slice them, rinse them to get rid of some of the starches so you end up with a crispier chip, and then fry them up and salt them at the end. As this time lapse of me making an ungodly amount of potato chips plays out, now might be a good time to talk about the current state and my future plans for Guild of Gluttony. I get the question pretty often of when is the next video coming out, or what is the next recipe that you're gonna do? And unfortunately my answer is usually the same: I don't know. I really enjoy making these videos, and of course I love making the recipes as well, and so I really don't want it to ever get to a place to where it just feels like another obligation. And all my life, my interest in my hobbies has been such an inconsistent thing, which is unfortunate whenever I have so many ideas for a project or a brand that I'm currently interested in, knowing that I might not be in about a week or two. So while it may be the detriment of the growth of the channel, I'm okay with being a little more inconsistent in order to stay personally interested in keeping it going. But back to the recipe, it is now time to fry up the chips, and you'll see by all these beauty shots I have this brand new Dutch oven, which I got from my family for my birthday. This Dutch oven is perfect for frying up potato chips because it can fry in bigger batches just because of how big it is, but it also maintains its temperature pretty well. I tend to use vegetable oil, but you can use whatever oil you want. If you want peanut oil for a different flavor, or maybe olive oil for maybe a little bit of a healthier option. I think the ridged potato chips at Trader Joe's are made with sunflower oil, and those are some of my favorite, so that's another option as well. So once the oil heats up, I like to do a small test batch just to see how the potatoes will react and how long it takes for them to cook. And it's also nice that you can have a little snack because this takes a long time. Just be sure to make extras to share with your friends. So once you feel good about your test batch, it's time to start with the big batch. The main difference here is that with a small batch, it won't change the temperature of the oil very much, but when you add a bunch of chips at once, it will lower the temperature of the oil, so things might take a little bit longer to cook. For me, when it comes to frying things, it's just kind of a guessing game for the first few batches, but then once you get a hang of it, it's just lather, rinse, repeat. You can even see it just in this time lapse alone that the first batch fries up pretty quickly and gets brown, and then the next batch takes a lot longer, so I'm able to keep my eye on it a little more to make sure it's perfect. But when they get to the point to where you think they're done, it's best to let them cool on a wire rack so that the oils can drip off and so your chips don't end up really soggy. This is also the point where you want to add salt, and if you want to add any flavorings to it, you can do it here because some of that excess oil can help it stick a little better. This is a zester that my aunt recently got for me, and this thing is amazing. It's super sharp, and I would definitely know firsthand. Let's just say this recipe that I'm working on now is not the first time that I've tried to include finger in my ingredients. Just always be careful in the kitchen, please. So here I'm starting on the plum sauce that's included with this recipe. I was super intrigued by its inclusion because I've never really eaten much with plum in it, so I was excited to cook with it. The plum sauce includes a few different ingredients, one of them being the biggest clove of garlic that I've ever seen in my life. I feel like I can normally tell based on the ingredients list if I'm going to like something or not, but again, this sauce had several ingredients that I've never worked with before, and it also had several ingredients that I've never used in combination before. So here is where I'm adding the plum jam that is the base of this sauce, which I feel like would have been really fun to make myself, but might have been a little bit too much of an undertaking for this go around. So here I just whisk everything together and then it just simmers for a few minutes just to let the flavors meld together. The sauce ended up being a little bit chunkier than I was expecting and not necessarily what I would desire for a dipping sauce. So next go around I would probably blend it up a little bit once it's all cooked. It ended up like more of a syrup with chunks of garlic, plum, and onion in it, so I feel like blending it all together might thicken it up. So here's the shot of my first taste test, and as you can see, I got a little overzealous, so just obviously make sure it's cool before you eat it. You'd think at 27 I would have figured that out by now. And so this is a real-time shot of me processing what I'm experiencing, what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling about this thing that I've been working on. Sometimes things can pleasantly surprise you, and sometimes things can unexpectedly disappoint you. I can't really say that this did either. I really just wasn't sure how I felt about it at this point, but I was excited to try it with the chicken tenders to see if that might solidify my opinion. I also went off book a little bit and added some more of the ingredients that I felt like were working in the sauce to see if that might change my mind a bit. And obviously I'm gonna take my time to make sure it is cool this go around. Fool me one time. Again, shame on me, I'm 27, I should know by now. But after those adjustments, I felt like it was working better and I was a little bit more excited about it. I think? Maybe cautiously optimistic is the better word here. It's just the worst when you work on something for so long and then it doesn't pan out because you're angry about the failure and you're still hungry and all that you're left with is bad food. But again, I was still holding on to hope that the chicken tenders would come in and save the day. As I mentioned before, the potato chips were part of the breading for the chicken, and the other part is made with toasted panko breadcrumbs. So those go on a foil-lined baking sheet. Foil-lined? Oh, dang it. So now while the oven is preheating, it is time to cut the fingers. And by fingers, obviously, I mean chicken breasts that we are just cutting to look like fingers. Fortunately for me, I have 10 of those, which I can use as reference. Perfect. So for the rest of these, it's just pretty much standard procedure. You don't want the chicken tenders to be too thick so that they don't cook all the way through, but you don't want it to be too thin so that it doesn't dry out in the oven. And definitely make sure to wash your hands after this step so that you don't cross-contaminate anything from the raw chicken. And there we go. There is the foil to line the baking sheet for toasting our breadcrumbs. I'm sure in this case it would have been fine without the foil, but this is just a lesson to always reread the recipe because even the smallest slip-up can end in disaster. Trust me. Now it's time to start prepping the potato chips for the breading as well. I could have just crushed these up in like a Ziploc baggie or something like that, but I decided to go with the food processor to try and get them to the same consistency as the panko crumbs. Plus I had made quite a few chips, and so that would have taken a really long time. However, after crushing them all up and measuring it out, I actually didn't even have enough chips. So I was crossing my fingers hoping that the chips mixed with the panko would be enough to at least coat all of the chicken, because otherwise I would have just had to make less chicken, which totally would have been fine for one meal, but I like to have leftovers personally. So after using my wild shape ability to turn into a duck, inspiration hit. I just supplemented what I was lacking in potato chips with crushed up Pringles. It worked just fine. So then I just mixed all the components of the breading together to make it a bit more homogeneous, and then it was time to start prepping the space for battering the tenders. This is always the step in making fried chicken that things start to get really messy. Setting up my station was pretty standard. These strips are like most others. You start with flour, dip it in an egg wash, and then put it in your batter. Normally from there, I would personally fry it up, but this recipe calls to bake them, which is a little bit of a misnomer by calling them fried fingers, but who am I to judge? This is also probably the most chaotic way that I've ever broken eggs ever, but the egg wash gets a little bit of salt and pepper, and then it's time to whisk it up. You want to make sure that your eggs are whisked pretty well, since it is essentially serving as an adhesive for the breading to the tenders. So taking a little bit more time on this step is going to help you get a more consistent stick all around. The next step is to take the last paper towel that you have in your entire apartment and use it to blot your chicken dry. You want to make sure that there still is just enough liquid that the flour will stick to it, but not too much to make the flour cake onto it. And from here, you're just going to dip all of your pieces of chicken first into the flour, preferably using a different hand than you were going to use to dip it into the egg wash. I had to use the same hand just because I was holding the camera in my other one, but ideally you would use what's known as the wet hand, dry hand technique so that you don't have to dip a wet hand into dry batter, which will cause it to just cake onto your hand and waste batter. But after the egg, it goes into the breading that you've prepared, and what you want to do is cover it and then really press it in so that you get a lot of that batter coating each strip. This, after all, is where a lot of the flavor is going to be on these, so you want to have a lot of it there. And then after that, you're just going to line these on your baking sheet, and then you'll just repeat the process until you're out of chicken. Again, use both hands or else your thumbs end up looking like this. And then after a few minutes, we go from something like this to looking like something like this. This recipe says that it serves 4 people, but depending on the size of your chicken breasts and if you threw in sides or something like that, you could probably feed 6 people easily. I was actually home alone the week that I made these, so I intentionally made a lot so that I would have lunches for the whole week. I would bet they reheat pretty well in the oven. However, I was using a microwave to reheat them, so they got a little bit soggy, but next time I make these, I'll try that out. So, as is customary on this channel, when we send food into the oven to start its adventure, as we close the door, wave goodbye, and then send it off with a kiss. And these honestly don't cook for a super long time. They were only in there for about 12 minutes. So all things considered, if you're not making your own chips or dipping sauce to go along with it, this could be a pretty easy meal to put together from start to finish. But as I've mentioned a few times on this channel, if I can make something the homemade way or old-fashioned way, I'd like to do it at least one time, just so I can learn the right way and say that I've done it, I guess. And again, raw chicken is never your friend, so make sure to cut into it and look into it to make sure it is fully cooked. If you have a thermometer, check the temperature before you eat it. And that brings us to the beauty shots. I feel like I really nailed the classic chicken tender look and the color, and the plum sauce had that dark, rich color as well. And now for the taste test. All right, I'm gonna do my taste test. I'm gonna make it really quick because I am hot and tired. This took almost all day to make. You can see my shirt is dirty. The kitchen, I was able to kind of keep up with it as I was cooking, but I have no idea how this is gonna be. I hope it's good. Here we go. It's interesting. I don't love the plum sauce. The chicken's great. I don't think I like the plum sauce very much, but I personally don't like a lot of super sweet meals, especially super sweet sauces. I think that's what they were going for here. So for somebody that likes that kind of thing, I think this is great. For me, I would probably just stick with ranch, but let me try the chicken just by itself. Okay, no, that's really good. I'm usually pretty wary about oven cooked chicken. I usually just like to fry it myself. This is one of the first oven baked chicken recipes that I've really enjoyed. So, I don't know, it's kind of hit and miss. Definitely learned a lot. I really like the integration of the potato chips in the batter or in the breading. Just not a huge fan of the sauce, and I have a lot of it left. And I've got a lot of chicken fingers to use it on, so, but I might make some ranch to go with this.